Hi, I'm Dermot Keirn, the creator of Genius Choices. I am offering one-on-one and group transformational coaching sessions to those who want to live a life they love and for those who want to live their true nature and purpose. This means learning to make choices from the genius part of yourself. We all have this within us, but we just weren't taught how. If you are willing to do whatever it takes to become a conscious creator by primarily letting go of your adopted limitations and how you see yourself right now, then I will have your back and I will fight for you on your journey of becoming a conscious creator. But first, let me share my story with you should you choose me as being your mentor. Let's start with my grandparents. This is Tony and Lucille Picorni, my mother's parents. They met when they were teenagers at a state fair close to Omaha, Nebraska. My grandfather said that he saw Grandma with her sisters at the fair and challenged her to go up on a Ferris wheel with him. Well, after that, they wrote letters and communicated for a couple years, and they wanted to be married. However, because of her German background and his Czechoslovakian background, my great-grandparents on both sides refused to accept the marriage. Well, when she turned 18, they eloped. They had 7 children, my mother being the second daughter born. They stayed together until they passed in their 90s and made this choice, a true choice from their hearts, regardless of the family entanglements. I will show you how to recode and unravel your own family entanglements should you choose to work with me. This is my father with his 2 older brothers and 3 younger sisters with my grandparents, Austin and Minnie Keirn in Ireland, all of Irish descent. I was told they referred to my grandfather as the boss and my grandmother as the missus. After my father completed his education in England, he came to America to fulfill his personal dream. In 1955, he was the first psychiatric nurse in this country. He was the director of nursing of both Osawatomie, Kansas, and Eastern State Hospital in Washington State. He was referred to in a Kansas historical book of being one of the young male nurses that helped change the mental health system of this country. He fought for the rights of the underprivileged his entire life. Here's a picture of my parents on their wedding date in 1958, along with my mother's German grandparents, who came full circle and attended their granddaughter's wedding. I was the second born son of Martin and Angie, and a theme in our lives were for us kids to get the best education possible. They had no idea how far my own education would go by teaching others to be conscious creators. I consider this to be the highest education available on this planet. This is the hospital my father worked at, and this summer when I was 12 years old, he thought it was a great idea to take my brother and myself out to the hospital every day for a couple of months to volunteer to help the staff to take care of the elderly. It was a great life experience. My first degree was in chemistry, and I studied chemistry, math, and physics, not because I wanted to be a chemist by any means, but I was fascinated with chemistry and wanted to know how it worked. Besides absolutely loving what I was learning, I also set up and organized the student affiliates of the American Chemical Society on campus. I was able to have my own office space in the department and received the Outstanding Senior Award. I put myself through college by working full-time as an attendant counselor, giving total patient care to non-ambulatory and developmentally disabled children and adults. This worked out wonderfully because I was able to schedule my days off in the middle of the week. I worked the 3 to 11 shift and took all my college classes in the morning. I completed my degree in a little over 3 years, quit my job, moved to Oklahoma, and began studying chemical engineering. Graduate school was challenging. Not only was I tasked to take all the graduate courses, but I also needed to take all the undergraduate engineering courses as well to complete the degree. Meanwhile, I was in the laboratory 7 days a week, designing, creating, and producing a new blood substitute that worked better than what was available in the world. Here's a picture I took of one of the laboratories I worked in for a couple years. This was my bench in my area where I did all my designing. The interesting part of designing chemicals is that often you have an idea what you want to produce, but you don't know how you're going to get there, so you try different methods, different temperatures, different pressures, different solvents, different time periods, and then you would check your results by chemical analysis to see how you did. So it's an iterative process where you try something again, and the whole thing was to see if we could produce something that had not been created before. So in order to make a blood substitute, one needs to use a fluorocarbon because fluorocarbons absorb oxygen in oxygen-rich tissues, which is the lungs, and delivers it to oxygen-poor tissues, would be the tissues of the body. But in order to do this, one needs to dissolve the fluorocarbons in the blood, which means taking something that's not soluble in water and making it soluble. So in order to do this, what the researchers had done in the past was make what's called a hydrocarbon surfactant, surface active agent, something that would dissolve the fluorocarbons, but they didn't work that well. So our idea is, what if we created a perfect fluorinated surfactant that would dissolve the fluorocarbons in the blood, and then it would work. Okay, so with all the research, we determined that there was a certain length that worked best for the chemical called polyethylene glycol added to our fluorocarbon. And as an image, the PEG stands for polyethylene glycol. There's a certain chemical length that worked perfect. And we reacted these molecules so we would produce multiple chains that had polyethylene glycol on one side and fluorine on the other. The problem is, in chemistry, sometimes you get one fluorine reacting with the chain, sometimes you get fluorine reacting at both sides, and sometimes it doesn't react. So there was a huge mess in being able to separate all these different parts, and the results were abysmal. After a couple years of doing all kinds of research and all kinds of experiments, I remember having the idea. I was in a meeting with one of my graduate professors, and I said, what if we made these polyethylene glycol chains twice as long? What if we made the chain twice as long and essentially cooked it for a week so that every single molecule would react? We'd have twice as much fluorine in the batch as polyethylene glycol, and therefore the chain would be twice as long. Now here's the catch. Once we had this mixture, wouldn't all these chains be long enough to fold so that the fluorine would be at one side and all the polyethylene glycol would be at the other side? What would happen if we did that? And I remember that moment. It was like an epiphany. It's like, this could be what works. And guess what? Bottom line is, it did work. We produced a better surfactant than what Green Cross was producing in Japan. I got out of graduate school with results. Now I'll back up a minute. About 2 years before I graduated, something happened that forever changed my life. I came to a crossroads, and I'll share this awakening with you. This was my experience. I was waking up on a Sunday morning to an alarm that was set on what we called a clock radio, where when you set your alarm, the radio station would play when you woke up. And at that morning, somebody was interpreting dreams on the radio. Well, that particular night, I happened to have a very vivid, strange dream, so I jumped out of bed, went over to the living room, and got on the phone and was told I would be on the air in 2 minutes. So a woman came on the line and asked me to share the dream I had. And so I shared my dream, which was myself, my brother, and my father were hunting geese with hunting dogs. And as the dogs retrieved these geese, they were huge, they were gigantic, and they were rotting. I asked her, "What does that dream mean?" She said, "Dermot, you're not doing anything." And I took offense. I said, "I am busy. I am after it 7 days a week, morning, noon, and night. I am busier than I've ever been in my life. You can't tell me I'm not doing anything." There was a moment, and she said, "Dermot, you're not doing anything for yourself." You've heard the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Little did I know that I just met my mentor that would guide and teach me for the next 7 years. I started taking weekly classes that Wednesday, and not only did I learn how to interpret my dreams, but I learned tremendous lessons about concentration, visualization, meditation, tremendous amount of subconscious work, how to move energy throughout the meridians of my body. But I think some of the greatest lessons were identity lessons. One of the greatest shifts in perspective I made was when I, through my experience, knew that I was a soul rather than a body, because we're taught that we are this body from the day we're born. During a deep concentration exercise, I looked over at my physical body from the perspective of who I am as a spirit, and I saw that I was separate from my body, and that all my awareness was from the perspective of being a soul. So I see myself this way, and I see every other human this way as well. Before I graduated, I was hired as an aerospace engineer at Tinker Air Force Base, which is outside of Oklahoma City. So I was working on my master's on the weekends, I was teaching classes of metaphysics in the evenings, and I was working as an aerospace engineer during my day hours. Life was full. And what you see here is an AWACS. It's one of the airplanes I created an engineering change order for to improve the design. I later chose to accept a position with the Technical Assistance Team for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Here I am in training in Buffalo, New York with chemical protective equipment. Right about this time, there was a terrible chemical accident in Bhopal, India, where 500,000 people were exposed to methyl isocyanate. The world was in despair, and we had to create some kind of legislation, not just in the United States, but worldwide, to help prevent chemical accidents like this ever happening again. I got very involved with the creation of the legislation of the risk management program here in the United States as an EPA contractor. Then I wrote and published the comprehensive planning document, which compiled multiple chemical lists and laws across several agencies, EPA, OSHA, and DOT. The purpose was to help facility owners and managers understand and manage risks of these hazardous materials and chemicals on site. If you type my name into Amazon, you'll see this comprehensive planning document listed. However, it's out of print. And soon after this, I got to go to India myself for 5 weeks to help the state of Maharashtra and their government develop the beginning of the legislation there, modeled after U.S. law. I absolutely love the people there, their kindness and their humbleness.
I even had some fun playing with some of the local wildlife. I went into the private sector for a couple years and became vice president of a small environmental firm, which gave me the idea of starting my own. I started U.S. Environmental about the turn of the century and expanded it into 18 states for a 12-year period. Throughout all my experiences of expanding my own self-identity through my career choices, I was always on a continuous quest to learn. I always knew that there was a much deeper, sacred part of ourselves on the inside, and that what I was taught in religion didn't even scratch the surface of what I hungered for. I saw people all around me that had no idea about their true nature and purpose. When I was 22, I read the autobiography of a yogi and was so excited that I could hardly sleep for 3 days. I just got a glimpse that there was so much to life that I had never considered. I studied and taught metaphysics classes to over 1,000 students over a 7-year period, 3 and 4 nights a week and every other weekend. I went to see Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer. I listened to Esther Hicks and was astounded what she had to say. I practiced meditation, concentration, visualization, slowing my metabolism and heart, using kinesiology to verify communication and connection to nature realm. I was asked to present a 5-day workshop in Australia at an ashram to 40 persons on the right use of will materials for opening up denied and repressed emotions. This is the venue that we had in Adelaide and ended up doing a group drumming on the beach on the last night. The group energy is very powerful in Australia. I was also blessed to be able to spend time with this Aborigine woman, her grandson, and an interpreter when I was there. The greatest blessing I ever received in my life was my daughter, Summer. I can't even describe the lessons that I've learned and the depth that I've been taken to by having her in my life. Here we are, just before she turned 15 on Father's Day. Almost 2 years ago, a good friend of mine introduced me to the magnetic mind method of creation taught by Christopher Duncan. He did his own research throughout the world and combined 3 key elements to creation. The first element was the research conducted by Dr. Gary Flint, who worked with thousands of psychiatric patients over the years, and he used a method using the superconscious mind to assist them to rewrite the coding in their brain to release the traumas that they had experienced. The second key element was brought forth by Colette Stryker. She collaborated with Dr. Flint while he was still alive and developed the MAP method of using the superconscious mind to again recode the brain to let go of traumas and also to let go of resistance. Here they are together. Christopher Duncan then collaborated with William Whitecloud, who published several books on creation using the superconscious mind. And by combining these 3 methods together, the magnetic mind was created. The magnetic mind method can be used by anyone to create a structure to 1. Choose what they would love to create. 2. Use the superconscious to let go of our learned and inherited resistance to this creation. And 3. Receive the action to be taken that will allow the creation to manifest into reality. Everybody is creating all the time. They're just not consciously aware of it. After I became aware of the magnetic mind method and created several wonderful things in my life, I can look back and say that these would have been absolutely impossible in my mind to create before I met Chris Duncan. I became certified in this work and can absolutely teach you how to be within a creative structure in your life. I am here to teach you either one-on-one or in a group setting how to let go of your inherited identity, who you think you are, to become who you truly are so that you can live your true nature and purpose. If you want to break out and create in ways that you never thought possible, so that you can live your true nature and purpose. Contact me here at Genius Choices and we'll have a discussion. We'll have a talk and we'll see if this is a fit for you. Thanks for listening, and I enjoyed sharing my story.